Hi everybody, welcome back to the channel. I'm Jake, this is Nadia, this is Buddy, this is Sedona, and Babu is on the ground over here. Today we are talking about Knock at the Cabin, which is the latest M. Night Shyamalan film. I heard some pretty good things about it, some mixed stuff. Yeah, so I'm very curious to hear what you have to say about this film. I personally was pleasantly surprised. I thought it was pretty good.
I thought it was great.
Thank you all for watching. All right, so what did you like about it? Because I wasn't fully on board until like maybe halfway through. I was a little bit like, let's see where this goes.
I was good with it from the beginning. I thought I'm not gonna lie, the only reason I decided to watch it was because of the director. And because I really wanted to see Rupert Grint would be in this kind of film, because he's been doing a lot of like darker comedy TV shows. Like I haven't really been into any of them.
I mean, that's the thing about M. Night Shyamalan is that you do always want to watch because his name is on it, because he's always interesting. Mm-hmm. He's never boring. He's never bland. Like even if it's horrible, at least it's always interesting.
Yeah.
We both enjoyed Split recently. But Glass was horrible.
Yeah. He's very polarizing.
You liked his show that he did, right? That was an Apple show about the baby.
Rupert Grint was in that. The things that I liked, I really love the directing of it. I really like the mystery of it. There's a good mystery of like, are these people crazy or are they like actually what they say themselves to be? It could go either way, and I could see merit in it going either way. There is a decisive mapping when it comes to actions, and I really like that. I thought the ending was tragic but also hilarious. I like that as well.
Hilarious. Interesting.
Yeah, I can say why it was hilarious. Because I'm a dark individual.
I agree that the directing was interesting. However, at times it felt too overly mannered and stilted in some ways. Like it was definitely like stylistic, trying to do something interesting, which I appreciate that. But at other times, especially the first half of the movie, it felt like we were watching someone make a film who can't move their neck at all. So they're just always like moving like this, just kind of like this awkward feeling. Maybe that adds to the tense feeling and the awkward vibes of it, but it also made the performances, the blocking feel a little bit like in most of M. Night Shyamalan movies feel kind of stilted and weird. However, once the story got moving, it worked out, and I thought the performances were nice. I was actually invested in the relationships between the characters, especially the two dads. The incorporation of the flashbacks was really intriguing and kind of guessing where it would end, because you're presented with a central problem that's going to have to get solved by the end of the movie, and you're kind of guessing like, oh, maybe it'll go this way or this way. So there were some things with the TV, which I'll elaborate in spoilers, that I thought was a bit annoying or unrealistic, but those are just minor nitpicks. Overall, it was very satisfying and it had kind of good emotional conclusion. Now, there are some differences from the book and the movie that I do want to talk about. This is not an original screenplay by M. Night Shyamalan. This was adapted from a book by Paul Tremblay, I believe, called The Cabin at the End of the World, which I think is a much better title. They should have stuck with that.
No.
You prefer Knock at the Cabin over The Cabin at the End of the World?
The reason why I do is because there is, like I said, that suspense factor there. And I think the title of the predecessor kind of spoils that.
I don't think so. I think it's could be metaphorical. It'll make more sense when I explain to you what happens in the book, because there are some big differences between the book and movie that are interesting to look at. Anyways, thoroughly enjoyed it. Dave Bautista was a standout. Gave a really nuanced performance that kept becoming more and more complex. So
obviously it's not a spoiler to say that like this is about a group of individuals who break into a house where a couple and their kid is staying at, because they have had these visions, right? And they need to execute these visions that they've had. There is such a thin line between this movie being boring and actually like fun.
Yeah,
because
good point. Yeah.
And I think that like it's interesting because I felt that the director was tiptoeing that line throughout the whole film.
Between boring and fun.
Yeah, and
it's a locked room mystery sort of. It's very self-contained.
But I really loved the way that they sort of turned action scenes. I thought the acting was great.
Shall we go into spoilers?
I think you're great.
Thank you. I think you're great.
I think my hair looks wet.
Spoilers for A Knock at the Cabin.
We still have to rate it.
Yeah, but you recommend it?
I recommend it.
What would you give it?
8.9.
Wow, that's very high.
Mm-hmm.
I'll give it a 7 out of 10.
Okay, Nadia. Ready for spoilers?
Yes. 3, 2, 1. Spoilers. So I really liked the development of the Rupert Grint character possibly being someone who assaulted them in a bar.
Yeah.
That was very interesting because you're always like trying to go with like maybe these cult people are right, but there's no way to prove it really. You see the TV stuff, but that could also be disproven. Like they were planning that. If I were in their shoes tied up in those chairs, I'd say, okay, show us more TV, show us some more channels, give us the remote so we can see.
Yeah.
I mean, I don't know if they just had one channel out there in the woods or whatever, but I felt like the cult was doing a poor job and they could have had some other way to show them like, hey, this is actually happening. Planes are falling out of the sky. We didn't, create this. They could have done a better job of convincing them, I think. Still, there's that like iffy part of like this could be a plan just to like hate crime them, and there's that kind of
I love that part, and yeah. I have to say one thing that I really love that they depicted in this film was the idea of, okay, so when you've been victimized or marginalized a lot of times, right, you sometimes get paranoid that certain person may not have the best intention for you, and you'll run into the same issue that you have had in the past that are reoccurring. I think I have that sometimes, like as a person of color. I've had that like just something lingering in my mind, like, is this person discriminating or are they just like being rude? You know what I mean? I don't know the difference because there's been a lot of like instances of both sometimes, so I have to kind of like look more towards their actions and seeing where they come to a decisive conclusion for that. But I really love the portrayal of that because one of the characters, I mean both of the characters, but one specific character is really like looking back at their past and seeing like them being targeted for being gay, right? Not being supported, having to like really go through challenges and push through all the adversity because of their status in society. I really love the highlighting of that because it's like, okay, trauma can grow into something more. You're always like going to think back at that trauma. We are, after all, our experiences, and then so it was really nice to see that depicted.
Yeah, I agree. I really liked how they explored the people who like broke in and kind of flipped on the head this notion of the crazy cult people and how they were like extremely normal. And it added to the feeling of like, this is not a typical thing. So I do want to briefly go into, I guess, spoilers for the book. I looked this up online. I may not be 100% on the details because I just saw a summary, but apparently in the book there's a scuffle and they're trying to grab a gun from Leonard. And the gun goes off. The little girl gets shot and dies.
Oh, wow.
So she accidentally dies. I guess it doesn't count for like the sacrifice or whatever, but they're so...
Because it's not a willing participant.
They're so upset and like obviously over this that they decide to like basically fuck this world. If everything is going to die and collapse, then who cares? And this, if any God exists that forces us to make this kind of choice, then it's a God that doesn't love us or what, Mm-hmm. So I would say it's a much darker ending compared to this one where it's like there is a sacrifice that can be made to save the world.
So there is an end completely in the book.
From what I understand, they decide not to do the sacrifice. The girl dies. They leave the cabin. All the other characters kill themselves or dead, They leave the cabin and it's uncertain still. At the end of the book, it's left to interpretation, I guess, if the world was actually ending, if it is actually ending.
Well, because
so
in the
it's
movie,
very this one's very definitive. Like this is what happens. The world was ending.
Yeah, that's really interesting because in the movie, I think one of the characters said something like the coach character said something about like Leonard. Yeah, he said that you guys will be the only ones alive,
right.
in the rest of the world. So is that the same like concept in the book that if they don't like?
It's unclear.
Yeah, because I would think like it's really interesting, very dark, because if your kid dies, but then you're left being the only person, you two are going to survive, then it's also like then you're burdening yourself because you're gonna have to live with that trauma.
It's certainly, I would say it's very like philosophical questions raised, and people who didn't like the ending of this movie were maybe like, I didn't like how M. Night Shyamalan spelled it all out for the audience. I didn't like how he declared, like, yes, this was real, this happened, the sacrifice was worth it. There are people who didn't like that. However, I feel like it's a different movie because of the ending. It's a different, like, story because of the ending. It's trying to say something totally different. I don't think those things are necessarily at odds. It's just different things. And I kind of like what it did with this theme of sacrifice. And like, look, I'm not looking at it from like what I believe, what my philosophy is or anything. I'm just looking at if it works within the movie, if I got like an emotional response from it. And I did. And I thought that it worked well with this movie, having that ending, especially the kind of that great final shot of the father and the daughter sitting in the truck, turning on the radio, turning it off with the happy song, you know?
That's what I thought was hilarious.
Yeah.
I thought the last scene was heartwarming, tragic, and also funny because a partner has to sacrifice another partner whom they obviously evidently love very much because for the greater future, for really their kid, their daughter. And then you don't 100% know if they're going to do it because the person who has to kill is also the person who's the most like uncertain about their reality, whereas the person who's sacrificing themselves is the person who's like, no, I know this is the right decision, but it's like very much like, okay, is that person going to go through with it? Because the guy who kills his husband is also the one who's telling his husband, you have a concussion, you're not thinking straight.
Right.
So really, like, he has to have not only kill him, but he has to also trust his partner with the concussion and having trauma with under the circumstance that, okay, I'll kill you because I trust your vision regardless of everything else, right? But also, like, when he goes back to the treehouse to get his daughter, they have this moment where they cry. They're like together, you know, they're actually consoling each other. And then they go to the restaurant and it seems like everything is going to be fine. There's a definitive answer that the sacrifice was worth it. Because I think like you see in the flashback how much these partners have gone through that you don't want the husband to have their life being like meaningless, right? Like, and I think like if we didn't have that answer, then it would make the sacrifice meaningless. It would render their love meaningless in a lot of ways. If the sacrifice was shown as like, oh, I don't know if it was worth it or not, if it was left more like nuanced or there wasn't a decisive depiction at the end, it would have rendered the sacrifice meaningless, which I wouldn't have liked. But I also like that there was like a turning on and turning off of music at the end. The daughter turns it on. There's like a weird stare, like what do we do now? Weird pause and stare.
It was a nice little character moment. M. Night does really well. You think about like The Sixth Sense and Unbreakable, but you know, he doesn't, you know, in his bad movies he doesn't do that kind of stuff. But that was it was nice. There was some good solid like emotion going there. So yeah, I really liked it.
Me too.
All right, well, thank you all for watching. Let us know what else you want us to see. We'll talk to you soon.
Talk to you soon. Bye.
Bye.